obviously, there was still a lot of debate, a lot of argument, a lot of, are you sure? I think there wasn't a day in the sort of 3 months in the production process of this where I didn't have my chief exec saying to me, he sits, saying, are you sure? Is this right? Are you sure? And, so it took a lot of constant, but to be fair, once we got through the board, once they understood the vision, what we were trying to do, they pretty much then didn't see the film until it was finished. So we did then have that creative freedom to go away and make what we said we were going to make. Just have a quick glass of water. So this is how we sold it through. This was the first film that BBH showed us after the scripts meeting. So when David read the script about Wolf Attacker, they put together a little mood film, which I think is probably just worth showing you, because this was to put my fears away, but it would be childish or kind of like Shrek. They put this film together.
Prime Minister have any plans to cancel this tour of the Commonwealth, return home here to deal with this crisis?
Well, the situation is fully under control, of course, but yes, the Prime Minister will be flying home from Sydney.
Prime Minister.
The 2 innocent little pigs took the stand today in his own defense. Station 5 conducted an exclusive interview.
Everybody seems to know the story of the 3 little pigs.
We can now bring you live pictures of an extraordinary...
Scientists attribute this latest water shortage. Police have arrested 9 suspects.
2. I'm standing inside Plaza Mayor.
Protests in Iran, the threat of more strikes in Venezuela.
This whole thing is one big misunderstanding. I am 100% innocent.
So I won't underestimate how that helped us. So when you talk to the board about the scripts, and just to be able to play them, that kind of mood film, and say, this is the style, this is the kind of building up towards something important, it's grown up, it's serious, it's, that played a big part in us getting people on side and on board with this. We then used Ringan Ledwidge, the director from Rattling Stick. I don't know, do we know? Yeah, Rattling Stick. So at the time, was the person to work with in London. Ringan had worked on Axe, he'd worked on Hovis, he'd done some really big set piece, he'd done John Lewis, big set piece ads, told some amazing stories in those ads. I said he was the #1 person at the time. He's now gone to work for Steven Spielberg so he's now in Hollywood making a big Hollywood movie with Spielberg after all of the success he's had. But Rattling Stick we still use, and we're still going strong. We're a fabulous production company. So Ringan's treatment really was the kind of first step towards seeing how this would work, and I'll share some sort of storyboards and stuff with you. But one thing about his treatment, it was much darker than we thought it would be. And I continued trying to get that balance between, to be quite frank, not scaring children and still being able to tell the story in a grown-up way. So that was a balance that went. But we worked incredibly closely with them. I mean, I set up office at BBH for this period with a couple of the marketing team. So we literally had a room with creative at BBH, myself, 2 of the marketing team, and Ringan and Rattling Stick, and we worked for about 2 months in the same space to make sure that the vision was right. It clearly became, in the treatment, it felt very cinematic, very dramatic, and it really was the first time we started to see the film coming to life, and it was much more Christopher Nolan than cartoon, essentially, which allayed our fears. We then sort of went into this big process of costumes, location. I mean, everything was evoked to try and not root it in any one particular geography or time. So we agonised on the police uniforms. So we didn't want it to be LAPD. We didn't want it to be Met Police. We didn't want, tried to make something new that was universal and wouldn't make you feel it was American or English. Or we stole ideas from Beatrix Potter's at Royal Sadler's Wells, which was on at the time. So we used the craftspeople who were making the costumes and masks at theatres. We set the location. We had 2 days, one in Greenwich, It's quite a common filming area in London, near Greenwich Naval University. And then we found the most perfect house. I mean, if ever, you know, there's a house that sums up suburbia and fairy tales, and even had a little chimney with a little bit of smoke kind of coming out. The only thing we did, we put the little picket fence. We had to knock their fence down and put a little picket fence just to make it absolutely perfect. So we were very pleased with that. But it really was, I mean, it was a big process to get these little details right, and I think Rattling Stick were incredible in their attention to detail. For storyboards here, and I think importantly, once we started to map out that storyline, it was important to us to still keep the product demonstration element there, so to make sure that The Guardian was visible and it wasn't just an amazing film, but actually you were clearly getting that kind of product demonstration. I can share all this with you because you're not going to be able to see much of this, but I've included the whole storyboard as you can see it. And then just an important point, what I was really... It was really important that this didn't just feel like something that was from an ad agency. So to me, it was incredibly important, but it felt like it came from The Guardian. So we actually got our journalists involved, and we got them to write proper front pages, proper demonstration, you know, in the film as a demonstration of a wind tunnel, and we got the guy who does graphics to mock that up. So, I mean, if you speak to those journalists now, they'll say it was the best week of their lives. They could just write this fantastical stuff about wolves and pigs getting boiled alive. So it was really important to get the BBH copywriters in the same room as our journalists to give it that real sense of authenticity. So the shoot was, it was quite an ambitious brief. It was quite a tight budget. We had to shoot it in 2 days. The second day was a 21-hour marathon of a day. We did all the outdoor scenes day one, and day two was all the interior, so the houses and the courthouse and everything else. You can see some of the scenes there. Again, importantly for people who do this, I didn't let anyone else on shoot. So it was only myself and 2 people from the marketing team. Didn't invite anyone from the board, didn't invite any editor, no one else was there. So we had complete and utter creative control over the output, which I think is really important. I think if you'd have had, you know, if Alan was there, people would have had a different view and would have got in the way. And so in the nicest possible sense, I kind of kept everyone else away from that shoot, which I think was important. Ringham found it terrifying, which I liked. I think he was under no impressions. He knew how big this was, how important this was. We had the power of our brand. Ringham was a big fan. He knew what this had to do and how it had to transform us. As Ringham says there, it was a relief that he liked it. The first time we showed a rough edit, so the process, we got to a point where we didn't have much time, so we were starting to run out of time. We didn't have the luxury of being able to show people edit after edit after edit. So we got it to a pretty good first edit, and then showed the 2 most important people in my world, so Alan Rusbridger and his deputy editor, Kath Finer, who had helped us with lots of the pages and stuff. Their reaction, Kath burst into tears. So she just started crying once it finished, which I still, to this day, I don't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing. And Alan's exact words were, "That's the film I've always wanted. That's the film that The Guardian deserves. That's the film that we need to make," which was a ringing endorsement. He also, as I said, very intelligent, he also spotted about 5 flaws in the story, which we then managed to get out for edit 2. I'm going to quickly, I haven't focused much on media here, which is terrible when we have PhD and normally come in the room, but I've tried just to summarise how we had this incredible film. We knew we were making something special. We then had to think about where, in parallel with that, how we were going to tell the world about it. I've simplified this, but essentially 4 channels. Our own channels, including social. So we needed to reinforce the message to our own print and digital audience. We needed to tell them about it. We needed to force reappraisal for that sort of light touch audience who maybe come onto a website once a week or once a month. If I'm honest, that was the hardest bit. Like doing your own channels, like taking over the newspaper for a day, taking over all of the ads on the website. That was the hardest bit to get right, was getting through the internal kind of barriers to make it happen. Everything else you can just buy, can't you? Cinema, so we have a big, that progressive audience, big cinema audience. So we used cinema in 2 ways. We had a 9-month deal with a company called Picture House, who are more of an art house cinema, mainly based in London. Then we had a national campaign for 1 month with nationwide cinema releases at that time. So quite a big cinema campaign. We then used Channel 4 for television. I don't know if anyone knows Channel 4. They're quite a close fit to the Guardian's audience. On a normal campaign, we'd probably use them for about 80% of our TV. For this campaign, we gave them 100%. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, they threw so much else into the deal. So for them to get 100% share from this campaign was a huge benefit to them. They gave us a lot of 10-second teasers building up to the 2-minute event. So that was the TV strategy, was to have this moment at 10 o'clock on the 29th of February where we'd take over the whole ad break and play the whole 2-minute version. It would be introduced as a Guardian exclusive. They gave us 10 seconds and 20 seconds that would all build up to this event. So for 2 weeks before, there'd be little teasers. You'd see, I'll play some of them for you, but all these teasers all around Channel 4 saying, look out for this exclusive on Tuesday at 10:30. So you had this sense of excitement kind of building up to it. And they also own quite a few satellite channels as well. So in the end, I think it was, with hindsight, a good decision to use Channel 4 100%. And then we invested a lot in YouTube. So if you think the other areas are more traditional, more in touch with our own audience, more forcing reappraisal, talking to progressives, I thought YouTube was just a really nice, surprising part of the plan. So reaching a much younger audience, giving us an enormous amount of reach. We did what's called a homepage masthead takeover, which I'll come to and show you in a while. But that was the kind of big bit on the plan. Then we had lots of digital display and lots of social activity as well. But essentially, they were the kind of 4 elements of the media plan. So then about 2 weeks before, we started to tease the campaign out. So all across the kind of trendy media hotspots of London, we went with these posters, so never forget. So we had this kind of homage to a wolf. For the first week, we didn't have Wednesday the 29th. We didn't point to the TV slot at all. It was just a picture of a wolf saying never forget. We distributed these posters in lots of places. We fly posted them all around London. Again, didn't have a point to a TV ad, so people were just literally seeing this. And to kind of monitor that on Twitter and on Facebook and see people sort of taking pictures and saying, what the hell is this about? Never forget. You know, it was quite interesting. Then about 3 days before, we went out with the pointers. So we went out with 10:10 tonight on Channel 4. I mean, still no branding, so no mention of The Guardian on either of these. It was still a complete surprise to people when they saw it was going to be us. Then we had these 2, I mentioned, with 10-second and with 20-second teaser slots on TV and on our own website. So I'll quickly play you both of those. So this is the first time anyone saw anything to do with the campaign film. Let's play it. So that ran about 400 times on Channel 4 in 2 weeks' time. So there was a TV version of that and a VOD version of that. So we had this 2 weeks of excitement, of build-up. In the meantime, we'd been getting everything at work lined up, so the journalists had seen a version of the film. I'll come on to talk about internal communications and how important that was. But we were building up to this point. So we had the finished film, we had excitement, we had posters, we had teasers, and then we launched the film. So I'll play the full film for you now. So this went out in a programme on Channel 4, which actually had 2 of the most popular Guardian journalists presenting it. the advertiser, the announcement said, and now we have an advertising exclusive, and then we had the whole ad break, basically.
Little pig, let us in! It's the police! Move!
The third little pig is now being taken into custody, so the spotlight is once again shone on the grey area of homeowners' rights to protect their properties.
This isn't right. The 3 little pigs are the victims.
Wolf blew down 2 houses. We got what he deserved.
But the pigs went too far.
You've got every right to defend your property.
Pénétrer chez quelqu'un.
Kick the chinny chin chins up, fellas.
Boiling someone alive hardly constitutes reasonable force.
Somebody is going to break the law and intrude on you.
You can't protect yourself in your own home.
A man's home is his castle.
If someone tried to blow my house down, I'd do the same.
I knew the wolf. There's no way he could have blown down those houses. He had asthma.
But the wolf had asthma. So what's the truth about the pigs' houses being blown down? Inside job.
There's no reason why those 2 houses, one made from straw, the other from wood, should have collapsed. Not even a healthy wolf's huff and puff could bring them down.
The 3 little pigs have confessed to conspiring to commit insurance fraud, framing the wolf in an attempt to cover their tracks. Their motive was financial, as they struggled to keep up with their mortgage repayments.
Guilty. I can empathise with the pigs.
I'm behind on my payments too.
How could this have happened?
I've lost everything.
Thank you. So we were thrilled. We were thrilled. The reaction was kind of globally your reaction just then. It was international news. So overnight, bear in mind we played it once on Channel 4 in the UK, this thing just went crazy. So by next morning we were making breakfast television in Australia. There was a 20-minute segment on New Zealand's big breakfast time programme discussing the ad, what it meant for the future of news industry. Clearly, we'd hit a nerve. Okay, we'd talked about a subject that was very important around the world and had people discussing it all over the place. Publicity, that we could never have dreamt of buying. I haven't attempted to even put it in one place. It started a conversation. Obviously, Twitter was a big part of it. We had hashtags. We did all the social bit. It's the first campaign I did in the age where Twitter and feedback is kind of instant, where you used to do a campaign and you had a kind of inkling whether it was okay or not, and then you'd have a focus group about a month later and you'd find out what the reaction is and whether people like it. The day we launched the ad, we hosted a dinner for all of our top advertisers, and I spoke and introduced it, and Alan spoke. And then we watched the TV programme, then it went live. So it was a wonderful moment, but also you realise the minute we played the ad, everyone just got a screen out and looked at the reactions. It was I still can't comprehend what would have happened if it was a stinker, but you really had to search for the negative comment. It was, for a brand like ours, that's pretty incredible. People don't need an excuse to have a go and to have a strong opinion either way. But it was incredibly positive reaction. There's more Twitter. Just quickly, we carried on the story then. So we had 24 hours of YouTube. So we bought the UK homepage, which is bloody expensive, but probably the best money that we spent for this campaign. We had a huge, if you're anything like me, when you use YouTube, you go straight to a video. So having the homepage, you're questioning how many people actually do that. I think we got 15 million impressions in 24 hours from that website, with something like 13% click-through, or 13% of people watched the ad in the masthead. So a huge number, and played a really big role in carrying on the campaign. and plus loved the kind of, the news ticker, and I think BBH did this in a really clever way. It felt like news, it felt like breaking, it was parodying kind of Sky and everything. So a really successful part of the campaign. As I mentioned, our own channels were probably the hardest to do. On the day, so at 10 o'clock at night, the next day's paper, there was an ad on every page linked to the campaign. So we did, we have a corrections and clarifications column every day, and we said there in articles on the subject of the Three Little Pigs, we referred to the wolf as the big bad wolf. Multiple sources have subsequently claimed he was in fact a valued member of the community and of average height. So just a little bit of fun, a little bit of reward for the readers in the paper. There was an obituary, so of Mr. BB Wolf, Mr. Big Bad Wolf, and then we had the house, which was being repossessed and so on. So just a little bit of fun every page in the paper that really brought it to life. And then in the middle of the paper every day, we have something called Eyewitness, which is a big colour double-page spread. That day we did kind of stills from the shoot and behind the scenes and brought all of that to life as well. So a huge amount of effort went into making the paper right that day. We had a letter on page 2. So we took over the whole of page 2 and had a letter from, that's Alan Rusbridger, the editor-in-chief, get the whole picture. So incredibly linked to the campaign, pictures from the TV, etc. So it was really important, but it felt like it was coming from The Guardian and not just coming from the agency. There is a point about internal comms I want to make, which I think I probably underestimated at the time, but we've got a great internal comms team, and they worked with me on getting the whole building excited about it. And if you think of the reach we have through our journalists, Charlie Brooker has over 1 million followers on Twitter. So if you get those people talking about the campaign, getting people excited, it's a whole level of media that you don't pay for that you can get from those. So that was a really important part of the campaign. We moved the pigs and the wolf into our foyer. They're still there in our reception, so if you walk past, they're sitting there to greet all of our visitors. I played, actually really risky, but I think it worked. We played the film a week before to the entire building, so everyone at The Guardian had a chance to see it. It didn't have any sound, so it wasn't graded yet, it was very rough, but still thought it was worth doing it to make them feel part of the campaign. So give them an unfinished version, let them see it, played them a soundtrack separately, and then the day before launch, showed them a real thing and showed them it as a kind of special treat. So everyone felt part of it, everyone felt like it was a really galvanising moment. I think it was much more than an ad campaign. It really was a transformational moment at The Guardian. I think if any of you are in London and drop by and you speak to anyone at The Guardian, they'll say the same. It was one of those moments in our history where we kind of redefined who we are, what we're trying to do. So I think that was a really, almost a byproduct, but a really important one. So in terms of what happened, I'm not going to dwell on this. I'm English, so I get very embarrassed about success. I'll rush over these slides. But how we measure things at The Guardian, I always like to do a reach down to engagement. It's like a wedge of engagement. So this was this was 2 weeks afterwards, sorry. So 2 weeks after the campaign, how many people did we touch? How many people have seen it? 89 million Twitter impressions. How many people would have seen it on Twitter if everyone had been on at that time. So I don't take too much into that number, but certainly made a big impact on social sites. How many people saw it on TV? How many people have been in the cinema where we've been showing it? How many people, banners at, so it's 13 million on the YouTube masthead that we talked about. Then you get down to, what I care about is this bit. So these are the advocates. These are the people who are, from here, they're choosing to watch it. So they're making an active decision to click and watch, which I think is much more important than this bit. Down to how many people are commenting, liking, dislikes. I love that. 10,600 likes, 171 dislikes on YouTube, which apparently is the most distance between, the best ratio between like and dislike they've ever had on YouTube. Leo Messi, scoring all of his goals for Barcelona, has a lower ratio. So we've even beaten Messi, which is the only time in my life I can say that. How many people mentioned it? How many, and then advocates, kind of how many news mentions, how many news shows, how many people tweeted organically about it. And I'll come on to the global piece, but how many news stories, etc., etc. So I won't. This has obviously moved on since then. It's much higher, but I thought I'd show you the kind of instant, week-old reaction. We then measured the sentiment. So what were people saying? So it was great they were saying, great they were sharing, but what was the sentiment like? For The Guardian, that's an incredible number. So 76% positive is incredible. I mean, even on our own website, if you went on The Guardian's website today, positivity would, if it's 50%, it's good. People like to kind of fight against something and like to have a bit of a moan on there. So to be at that level of positivity all around the web, including our own site, we were delighted with. And you can see the kind of words that are coming up when people are talking about it. Pigs, Guardian, brilliant, YouTube. Yeah, so great, really pleased with positivity. I think the one big lesson, if you think of media, we had no media spend outside of the UK. So YouTube was UK, Channel 4's a UK station, and cinema in the UK. But you look at the global spread and you look at what happened to the ad. I think so. 17% of news articles are in Australia. In the end, in terms of views on YouTube, 16% of views were from the States, 14% of views were from Japan. It just seemed to kind of go global without us even doing it. And I think with hindsight, that's for one area. We didn't do anything with subtitles. We didn't really think about those countries, because if media was so focused in the UK, we weren't really prepared to kind of capitalise on that global interest. But really, really quickly, instantly, the story went around the world. And then we were very successful. We had, you can see the numbers, a 51% increase in unique browsers for the 2 months after the campaign. I love the fact people who'd seen the video on the site viewed 4 times more pages on the website than those people who hadn't seen it. So clearly there was this kind of bond with the video, and people were doing more once they'd seen it. A 32% increase in app downloads, so how many people were on the iPad, on the iPhone and Android. And we now have over 3 million more unique users a month than before the campaign launch. So there are lots of stats I could pull out about how it worked. But as I said, I'm English. Perception change, if you think about what we were trying to do and you think about that audience and their perceptions of The Guardian, we have a brand tracker every month that goes along and doesn't really move. I don't know if you must have them in your organisations, but it takes a lot to kind of shift something, shift perception on a brand tracker. The month afterwards, you can see the 15 measures that we wanted to improve, all improved. These were the 3 highest, so modern, innovative, and appeals to me. So incredible measures to shift by that. Interestingly, they stayed that high for about 4 months, and then very slowly started to come back down. They're still about 10% higher, but there was an initial increase and then slowed. And then for the first time, just because I was coming here, I said to the team, just let's get on one slide everything we won. So again, very un-English, but I was going to finish with this to say, actually, in terms of recognition, I sort of feel like I should retire now. I don't know what else. But we've got, the highlights. We won the Grand Clio for film at the Clios last month. We won the the Cannes Lion Gold for film and lots of Cannes Lions. So 2 golds for the film and lots of silvers. The One Show is a big American award, the TED Awards. That was a great one, the TED Awards. We were one of the TEDs, Adsworth spreading. So, essentially, really, really, global recognition for the ad that we did. And that's what I'm going to finish on. So thank you for listening. It's been an absolute honour to talk to you. And I'm obviously more than happy to take some questions.
One question I have, you as a Guardian, you're used to work in real time, The news spread out in split seconds, and you have to react to the news. So, and on the other side, you mentioned about a month of working with the agency, 2 months working with the director, spending time together, and I think it's great to have a common war room in the BBH office with you, spending time with the director and the creative director of the agency. So I'm kind of intrigued at a company that makes its own business out of seconds.
Yeah, that's really important.
How do you manage, and how did you manage, and the production company, to have the proper time to think about the campaign in a world where we normally do projects in just a few weeks and you have to go on air?
Yeah, no, very good question. And it is, and it's probably an area that's held us back in the past. I think when you try to do everything, as we often do. So The Guardian's advertising, it's incredibly tactical. So we have a whole, now we'll be working on an ad for Mandela, or, there's lots of work happening for this Saturday, next Sunday, tomorrow, all the time. So and we didn't stop that. So that carried on. But I think the key thing was just separating the two bits of work. And that's not without its problems. So to be honest, myself, two of the best of the marketing team worked solely on this. And the rest of the team carried on with the day-to-day, the next week, the Saturday, the Sunday. Can cause resentment. So if you've got a team working on something that's new and shiny and is hopefully going to do things like you see behind me, but I think it was really important. That's why we moved to BBH, to force that separation, because I think to try and do this as well as the day job would have been impossible. So as part of the whole planning process, it was making sure we had coverage in the office, that the rest of the team were going to be there and we're going to be working on the tactical and the quick turnaround stuff. And I think that's the only way to do it, to be honest.
So this means that you, on your side, you've been spending most of your time around this project, while the other team of the marketing were doing the ongoing. And same thing on the agency side and the media side?
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, there were just key people that were key.
Yeah, there were key people. So at BBH, and probably for the month building up to the shoot, there was creative director was there 50% of the time, account, copyright. I mean, they were more or less 100% for the month before. And the same at media. We were talking about Hugh Cameron, who's a chief strategy. He devoted his time to it. He was probably 80% of his time for a month. So it was a proper commitment, yeah. And we're a founding client of PhD, and we made a lot of that.
And how long did it take from the moment you decided to do the pitch, because the pitch was based on the new communication, and the moment the commercial went on air?
So the pitch was in November, and the ad was February.
From November to February?
Yeah, November to February. So, 4 months with Christmas in the middle. It was a very relaxing Christmas that year.
Thank you very much for this. What really does strikes me is the way you included the internal public to this really amazing thing, because I think this is really a challenge, even in England, to have your journalists in agreement with this. So this was a key part of the success, no?
Yeah, I mean, it was the hardest part. That was the hardest challenge, was getting, and it wasn't perfect. So you'd still have a backbench sub who would say, like, the money you're spending on this, we could get 2 new horse racing correspondents. Or, there's still that challenge, and but I mean, it was clear that we had to, anyone with foresight, anyone who could see what was happening around them, anyone who could see that print declines were just going, the logic was just so stark. And I think we spent a lot of time. I spent a lot of time working with them, explaining them, reading the script to them, and getting really key people. So Alan Caff, there's a guy called Ian Katz, the really key journalists. We spent a lot of time talking to them, encouraging them, getting them to input. We've got a writer called Tim Dowling, an American, who is very, very funny. He's on page 2 of our magazine every week. He inputted into the script. So once you're talking to journalists saying, well, actually, Tim Dowling said that bit was great, suddenly it kind of, you get acceptance. So, but it did take, and again, I don't want to overplay the fact, my role in it, but the fact I'd been at The Guardian for a few years, if I'd come from Sky 6 months ago, I think there would have been a level of distrust and but the fact that I'd worked with these people for a long time, and we had, you know, quite a lot of trust, and we'd worked together on lots of different things, whether it's promoting editorial supplements or their section or their, so yeah, we had that helped, but it was very important.
Have you discussed the previous script before the Three Little Pigs with members of the boards, or did you just mention the one that you thought that was the right one?
That's a very good question. We only discussed this one. We had, so even now, when you think about what happens next, there were 5 amazing scripts. So when I said once we decided fairy tale, there were 5 different scripts. So you ruled out, we had some, and I don't want to downplay, there were some incredible scripts around Tahrir Square and Arab Spring, but once you ruled those out, fairy tales, we had Cinderella, which was incredible, I mean, amazing script. We had Hansel and Gretel, Hansel and Gretel, Hansel and Gretel, you know, paedophilia, but kind of media scare around, so there were some incredible scripts, but we decided just to go forward with one, which I think was the right, I think if we'd have introduced, they were all good, that was the problem, and I think if we'd have introduced that element of choice, I think people would always have been thinking, maybe should have done that one, should have done that, yeah, so we were quite strong in our recommendation of just put this one forward. I still want to make the Cinderella one, that was good. Humpty Dumpty, that was the other one, Humpty Dumpty, he fell down and he smashed, and actually it was a night vision camera, and no one tried to put him together again. That was a kind of, you know, because of defence cuts in the army, and the government had made sure that, so etc. That was a good one. We'll make that one day.
But the disruptive idea is really the fairy tale idea, I think, and you mentioned the pre-sale internally. How did you pre-sell this idea, and to whom?
Well, it was to quite a tight board of directors. So there is, you know, and actually going there, having already worked with Alan, so Alan had seen the script, understood it, seen the mood film. So in the end, the board meeting was, you know, we set up, it has to be disruptive, it has to be different, it can't be telling you to buy a paper tomorrow, it has to be a big film with a big idea. And then, it was, I think once you go through the logic of, we need to do a product demonstration, so we need to show how The Guardian operates, show our unique place in the world, we need to show how we invite contribution. It can't be rooted in time or place or geography, it can't be a news story, therefore it has to be a fairy tale, a universal story that everyone knows. We don't spend half the time talking about the story. So it became quite, believe it or not, it became quite logical. I can still tell the story now. It became step by step by step, it became the logical thing to do, even though it was far from it.
Thank you.
Hello.
Just one question about the creative process, and you didn't mention very much the idea of exploring an insight. But for me, the success of the campaign, apart from the beautiful crafting and the orchestration, is the power of the insight, which is a universal insight about banks, losing your house.
Yeah.
And this, was it part of the brief in a way, or did you pick that fairy tale?
I probably
because of the link with this universal insight. I don't know about
I mean, there was clearly
Cinderella or the others, but the economical and social crisis inside.
So there was the challenge of how to make it, you know, not just a fairy tale, but root it in the social and economic situation that's happening. Yeah, absolutely. That was wasn't part of the brief, but it was very quickly an insight that everything built around. So how do you show? I think the trick was using old fairy tale, universal story, but rooting it in issues that were exploding all around us. So, you know, at that time, I think Lehman Brothers were about 4 months before this. We were right in the middle of that global capitalism crisis. So absolutely that insight. It wasn't part of a brief, but it quickly became a key insight into the whole campaign, is how you link that with issues that are happening all around us. Yeah.
Just one silly question. Once you have done that, what's next?
Yes. Yeah. So we're thinking about that at the moment. It's quite hard, isn't it? It's that second album. In England, we have a second album syndrome, where it took the Stone Roses about 9 years to record their second album, and it didn't live up to the first. So it made a huge impact. Right? So there is no doubt that brand. I think in the UK, what you'd call brand advertising has a bit of a dirty word, and it's just don't really understand it. You can't prove return on investment. You can't. The impact this has had on our business in terms of, even I haven't mentioned the whole trade advertising side, but in terms of how people do business with us, the doors this opened, the new money that came in, the sponsorship, and it was incredible. So if you wanted to, there's clearly a return on the investment. So we're thinking, at the moment we've done a couple of ads in this spirit, but nowhere near the scale, and they have been rooted in having a very clear outcome, like subscribe to the paper or download the app, so we haven't done something of this scale. I'm still in two minds whether fairy tales, what you don't want to become is the fairy tale brand. You need to move on, and I think of Honda in the late 90s, Cog, and there was some brilliant advertising. So it's a question. It's a very live question, but certainly, when we did this, I said we can't leave it another 25 years till we make another big statement about The Guardian. So that's a live question. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks.